scientist is also faithful to the scientific method, what's called the scientific worldview, or scientism, the dogmatic belief that science can explain everything. The present scientific worldview and outlook developed from British empiricism. We're talking here about the famous philosophers Bacon, Hobbes, Locke, among others. Going back to the 17th century, scientists based their methodology on 5 assumptions about the universe. First, that the universe is rational, reflecting the intellect of the Creator. Now, not all scientists, even a few centuries ago, were theistic, but most were. Second assumption of the 17th century, that the universe is accessible. In other words, human minds can comprehend it. Third, that it has contingency. It is the result of the influence of conscious beings. Fourth, that there is an objective reality behind everything. That might seem to be axiomatic, but that's a philosophical point, which is not possible to rationally or scientifically establish. It's accepted by most people, but it is an assumption that there is an objective reality behind everything. And fifth, that there is a unity, that everything's held together by God or a system of logic behind it all. These assumptions continue to the present day underneath the approach of modern science, although it has been divorced from God. This I took from Kitty Ferguson's book, The Fire in the Equations. From a more modern perspective, you can say, there are 3 assumptions, can be broken down to 3 assumptions that scientists make in attempting to understand the universe and its origin. Number 1, that all phenomena can be completely explained by natural laws, and everything can be explained in the language of mathematics. Number 2, these laws are universal. They apply everywhere and at all times. For example, electric fields in a controlled laboratory conditions, if you do the same experiment in one place, in one time, as long as the pressure, the quantity, say we're interacting chemicals within liquids, then the pH, all the conditions are the same, then the same result will be there every time. It's predictable because the laws apply everywhere and at all times. Another assumption is that although science, once you get into it, can be extremely complex, the archetypal picture of a photo of Einstein standing before a blackboard with all complex equations written on it. But an assumption of science is that at the very heart of it, the fundamental natural laws are simple. Now, of course, all this is unproven and unprovable. These are assumptions, and generally unquestioned assumptions that all of science, as we know it today, rests on. Natural phenomena as a progression from simple to complex, whereas in reality it appears that anything complex derives from something equally or more complex. The idea that biological evolution has come about from the simple to the complex. Why should that be when we see that life comes from life? Complex beings or complex bodies reproduce more complex bodies. We don't find simple phenomena giving rise to complex phenomena. Another scientific assumption, matter is assumed to underlie and produce all phenomena. This is what we can call scientism. Science should be open to all possibilities, but materialistic scientism is based on the assumption, and they're strongly held and emotionally held, vitriolically held assumption that it must be matter only. There cannot be anything beyond matter. There are different theoretical descriptions of matter, but all of them share the following 2 features. Number 1, that matter can be represented by numbers that correspond directly or indirectly to experimentally measurable properties. The universe is describable by mathematics. How that should be is another question altogether. Another assumption number 2, the behavior of matter can be described by mathematical expressions called the laws of nature. So following this logic, the idea is there that living organisms are combinations of material elements, and they must have arisen from earlier states of matter by purely physical processes. This is an assumption of materialistic science.
As Bertrand Russell said, I believe that when I die, I shall rot, and nothing of my ego shall remain.
That's it.
Yes?
The end. Nothing. There's nothing else.
How could it be otherwise? I mean, you have a brain, an evolved brain, which works by nerve impulses, and when that decays, what could possibly be left?
So you don't believe in, for example, a spirit or a soul? None of that that's all conditional entirely on a link to an actual cerebral...
Yes, if by spirit or soul you mean something that outlasts the brain, then I do not believe in it, no.
Really?
Well, how could I?
Another assumption, the mind, what is the mind? It's merely a name that we give, say materialistic scientists. The mind is merely a name for certain patterns of electrochemical interactions in the brain where terms like purpose and meaning correspond to patterns of behavior that arose as evolutionary adaptations or necessities. In other words, if we're looking for purpose or meaning, there's no real thing as purpose or meaning, even though scientists dedicate themselves to finding how everything is working, but ultimately, we're talking here about the completely materialistic scientists here. They don't believe ultimately there's any purpose or meaning. It's all just matter interacting with itself.
It's uncanny how powerful mathematics is in understanding physics. So I think Eugene Wigner had in mind the fact that, on the one hand, to understand the equations of physics, you need to know a surprising amount of rather sophisticated math. But on the other hand, the equations of physics are mathematically interesting. So mathematics is the language in which laws of physics are formulated, and in terms of which they have to be studied.
So you're using your own term, uncanny.
Yes.
He said unreasonable.
Yes.
Slightly different, but why do you think it's uncanny?
Well, it's as if the universe had been created by a mathematician.
A still living and very prominent American theoretical physicist called Edward Witten stated, reality, as well as we can understand it, is described by laws that are interesting and subtle mathematically. I think that is a summary of what we have learned in the last couple of centuries. Insightful. Not necessarily true, but it's an insightful analysis of how scientists think, or what are the scientific assumptions. Rupert Sheldrake, Cambridge scientist, lifelong career in science, now considered maverick, not part of the scientific orthodoxy, has listed what he sees as 10 core beliefs or assumptions of scientists. His first of the 10 core beliefs that he has enunciated. Number 1, everything is essentially mechanical. Living entities are complex mechanisms. Human beings, according to none other than Richard Dawkins, are lumbering robots with brains like genetically programmed computers. Number 2 in Rupert Sheldrake's list. All matter is unconscious. It has no inner life or subjectivity or point of view. Even human consciousness is an illusion produced by the material activities of the brain. Number 3, the total amount of matter and energy is fixed, always the same. There's a big difference in one point called the singularity, the exception of the Big Bang, when all matter and energy of the universe suddenly appeared. Remember, these are things which are just assumed or believed by scientists. Number 4, the laws of nature are fixed. They are the same today as they were at the beginning, and they will stay the same forever. That we've already discussed. Number 5, nature is purposeless and evolution has no goal or direction. Number 6, All biological inheritance is material. It's carried in the genetic material, DNA, and in other material structures. So that builds on the idea that everything is material. So even biological inheritance is material. It's just in the genes, mate. Number 7, minds are inside our heads and are nothing but the activities of brains. When you look at a tree, the image you are seeing is not out there where it seems to be, but inside your brain. Number 8 from Rupert Sheldrake. Memories are stored as material traces in brains and are wiped out at death. Number 9, unexplained phenomena like telepathy are illusory. And number 10, that mechanistic medicine is the only kind that really works. So let's take this philosophy of science a little further. Atheistic scientists say that religion is a matter of faith in something unverifiable, whereas science is a matter of verifiable fact.
Not in the sense of faith as meaning belief in something for which there is no evidence. There are various senses of faith in which scientists do participate. Those branches of science which I don't understand, for example, physics, it could be said, I suppose, that I have faith that physicists understand it better than I do. And so when I say something that physicists tell me, such as that there was nothing before the Big Bang, you're not allowed to talk about the word before in the context of the Big Bang, I sort of have faith that physicists understand enough to be allowed to say that.
Science rests on some basic elements of faith. Now, we've been through some of them. Now we're going to get down to some really, really basic ones. The basic axioms in science. Faith that our senses and our memories are generally reliable, rather than being hallucinations, which could, for instance, be induced by some unknown outside source. Our belief that our short-term thought processes are usually reliable. That is, that we are sane. Our belief that the entire universe didn't just come into existence a second ago, including all of us with a complete set of fake memories, right? It could be, for instance, that we just, all came into being just a second ago, and we have this illusion of having a previous existence so many years and so many memories. And also the faith that the universe won't just cease to exist, a blip of a second later. Our belief that other bodies which act like ours contain conscious awarenesses like our own, and that the intensity with which they feel, with which other people feel emotions, sensations, and how they think, can be judged by the complexity of their behavior. That's what we're talking about. What's being said is that it's a belief that material reality as we know it, as we perceive it, is similarly perceived by others. The belief that consciousness is permanently destroyed, along with the destruction of the physical body, and will never come again, will never come back. The idea of a future life or continuing life after the death of the body, continuing of the consciousness, maybe going to another body, a spiritual body or another material body, that's not accepted in the atheistic scientific worldview, which is widely held by so many people without thinking so many philosophical things. There's a lot of faith involved. Most scientists and others who believe in Big Bang theory, biological evolution, etc., they couldn't explain to you how it works or the supposed proofs for them, even if they're... Well, one reason is because there are so many supposed proofs for Big Bang theory and biological evolution. Most people accept the scientific worldview as just being correct because they're forced to go to school and they're forced to study science in school, and they get this worldview and everyone seems to go along with it. You may question, well, go along with it. Most of these things are obvious. That everyone around us, they see and feel and hear and smell and touch and taste in the same way that we do, and they perceive the same world that we do in the same way, more or less. You may say these things are obvious, but philosophers know that acceptance of axioms as absolutes is a metaphysical belief. All these analyses are nothing new. Going back to Aristotle, no science defends its first principles. Practically the beginning of philosophy or looking at the world beyond the conventional way, well, some philosophers would say that philosophy is looking at the world in a conventional way, but even to postulate that is unconventional. So the first thing we have to look at in philosophy is, what is knowledge? How do we know what we know? Epistemology. There have to be axioms before we can even begin to discuss anything. We have to have some accepted axioms. Otherwise, we can't go anywhere in philosophy. That was understood by Aristotle and any philosopher, even before him. But he said, no science defends its first principles. So, what's the gist of all of this? That scientists, atheists say that religion is based on faith, but science itself has so much faith built into it, so many assumptions. You may say that, well, scientific assumptions are reasonable assumptions, but who's to say what's reasonable?